You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Collington. Joining me, as always, Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing all right. A little tired today. I'm taking off a little bit of travel sickness. We'll talk about that as we get into it. As we're diving into today's show, follow us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast, including sportstalkphilly.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, consider hitting that subscribe button, the like button. It really helps us. Appreciate you. So, okay. So before we get into your travel over the weekend, there was another game to talk about because Kevin, there were 3 Philadelphia Flyers games this week. Two of them were home games. You covered 2 games, but they weren't the 2 home games. We'll get into
it. Yeah, I know.
So we started this week with a game that was, up until that point, the wildest game of the season.
Sure.
Now, it didn't hold that title for very long, in my opinion. But as we sit here, we recorded last week on Monday. We were looking at a couple days into the future at a Thursday night game against the Florida Panthers. Man, coming into that game, I was a little concerned because the Florida Panthers kind of seemed like they figured some things out. They're starting to shake off a little bit of that off-season rust. They're starting to look a little bit like the defending Stanley Cup champs, and they burst out to a 2-goal lead in the first 7 minutes on the road. So what do you think? What are you thinking in the building at that point?
Because I saw a team that couldn't complete a pass again. This was October Flyers hockey.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to use and before because I know you're going to jump when I say it because it's going to sound title worthy. I don't want this to be the title of the show. I think we'll have something else later, probably.
We'll see how it goes.
But that game gave me, and it was not the only one as the course of the thing goes on, but that game gave me such preseason hockey vibes. The disconnect, the abundance of scoring, the lack of structure from both sides at times. As you get through the course of the game, the officiating of it, everything, it felt like every party involved in that game was in preseason mode. And quite frankly, from my standpoint, we're into December now. I don't want to be going to see games that feel like they're in preseason mode. Not 28 games into the season. I don't want to be watching hockey like that. And it was like that they were pretty terrible for the first 10 minutes, leveled it off a little bit, but still gave up too many quality chances to a team like that it could have easily been 4-0 at the end of the first period, the way this was going. It didn't take long for it to be 3-0 anyway. And then they just do what they do. And the comeback trail is on. And here's one, and here's another. And
so the game just gets kind of crazy.
Well, and you're invested in it again at that given moment until they take a penalty.
And worth mentioning before we dive into the back half of the game, you mentioned preseason hockey vibes, and even though he has looked a lot better recently, Ivan Fedotov kind of looks like preseason Ivan Fedotov for a lot of that.
I'll double down on a comment that John Tortorella made later in the week as you get to another game and things like that. They pulled Fedotov after the first period and Kolosov went, and he did not look much better, honestly. Like that was just, it's funny. I did a spot on 97.3 pregame of that game. And I flat out said the reason that they've got 3 wins in a row and points in the last 5 games has just about everything to do with their goalies. And then their goalies turned in a performance that looked exactly like the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and maybe some of that has to do with the fact that neither of the 2 goalies mentioned are named Samuel Ersson. We did get a Samuel Ersson return this week, but it didn't come as early as many people thought it was going to come. He ended up starting the Sunday game, and we'll talk about his performance there a little bit later on. But I think, I wonder when it was decided that Sam wasn't going. Right? When did they announce Fedotov was going? It was just a couple hours before the game, right?
Morning of. They had a morning.
It was morning of.
So,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
There was enough of a So let's also dive into another aspect of this because yes, John Tortorella makes the decisions for things like this, but the guy who came out and told the media who was starting Thursday's game was Rocky Thompson. Now that's happened before, and to be fair, the release that we get in the media for the morning skate did say a coach is going to speak pregame, which gives the implication that we might
Well,
not hear
when
from Torts in the morning. It might be
yeah.
postgame, and that's okay. Nobody's worried about that per se. You're mostly just trying to get lineup information. We'll get to the post game in a minute. Let's go back into the game as they chip away at it. They take a penalty. They give up a power play goal. I believe at this point that was because the first 2 goals were even strength. So at this point, this is the second power play goal of the period for Florida, and their second of the game, obviously. So now it's 4-2. Then it becomes the Owen Tippett show for 30 seconds, and he goes out, scores 2 goals. By the way, during the course of this, Matvei Michkov has both primary assists on both of Tippett's goals, had an assist earlier in the period. He's got 3 assists in maybe about 10 minutes of gameplay, practically 10, 11 minutes of gameplay. And you get a tie game going to the third, and it's all of a sudden a completely different game. The building is jumping at that point. They are riled up, ready to go for what's to come. You just came back from down 3-0, 4-2. The same, sounding a lot deja vu from Vegas.
When
You're back
Tippett
in this
just
game.
scored 2, it sounds like he's warming up a little bit. Like the energy's high in the building. You're
Right.
talking about you are now playing with, whether you deserve to be here or not, you are playing an even game with the Stanley Cup champs.
And then you get into the third.
Yeah.
And you're pushing again, and you do score the goal that puts you in front.
Hathaway, we love it.
And it was just one of those things. Like, first of all, the contributions. Like, yes, Tippett scoring should be expected over the course of the year. You need him to score goals. That's what you want to see. You want to see him have a shift like that sometimes, right? And Tyson Forster scored the power play goal that got them on the board. That's a guy you want to see scoring too. So I'm not going to really make that out to be a unexpected thing. Nick Seeler doesn't score that often. And at least this season, because last season he did have a decent goal total, but this season Garnet Hathaway hasn't scored a whole lot either. Had chances all over the place through the last several games.
Yeah. He's
So
starting to get dangerous around the net front.
So he scores on a rebound. They've got the lead. Okay. Now you're just trying to kind of make everything work to get to the finish line here because you know the push is coming at some point. And really, it's interesting where I'm going to tell you where this game starts to turn kind of for this because it actually turns with something in the Flyers' favor. They get a power play with 6:23 remaining. Now that sets up an opportunity. Now you could score and make it a 2-goal game and really put yourself in the driver's seat with maybe 5 minutes left, let's say. You could not score, but you're down to 4.5 minutes left and takes 2 minutes off the clock. And instead, Bobby Brink takes an interference penalty 50 seconds later. Power play over. Now you're going to get 4-on-4. In the process of doing that, there's a scrum that breaks out. Now Travis Konechny's involved. That is a trade-off that the Panthers want every day of the week. Dmitry Kulikov goes off and Travis Konechny goes off. Now you lose a guy like that. Now you lose a guy like that at 4-on-4. Okay. In the time before all of those penalties are expired and not on the power play, Gustav Forsling scores on a shot that looked like it just went straight in, like Kolosov just didn't see it. Bad goal.
Yeah, so Kolosov came in relief in this game and didn't look the greatest and etc. But the goals he had given up earlier up to that point, Barkov on the power play, there's only so much you can do.
With a breakdown in front as he goes to a backhand, like he's going to put a move on you. Like forget that.
And then for Verhey on the power play.
No, I'm not worried about those. This was the bad one.
This is the bad one. This is the one that
you need to stop.
You need to stop.
Not only it's not a matter of you need to stop because needing a stop sounds like it's just a good scoring chance where you would like a save. This is one that I don't understand how it goes in. It shouldn't go in.
There has to have been some angle that we didn't see where he was screened or it got tipped or something.
Well, every angle that I saw didn't tip. Every angle.
Okay. Because maybe he couldn't get eyes on it, but regardless, that's a stop you'd really like to have.
It was relatively right off of a face-off, so I understand that aspect of it, but he just looked not set. Straight up.
I agree.
So then you get into the final 3 minutes of the game. It's tied. And to be honest, we're all doing probably the same thing at this given moment, which is starting to take our minds to that place where we had just had this big conversation about how many overtime goals does Michkov have? Are they going to get another overtime game in? Okay, guess we're going to get ourselves ready for this. And again, you have a situation where Travis Sanheim takes a hit from Sam Bennett. It's probably calculated a little bit. This is everybody knows the style the Florida Panthers play. This is a rough team. They're big, they're tough, they're physical. They get under your skin. This is the style they want to play. And Joel Farabee,
they're a borderline team.
And Joel Farabee takes exception. And I understand why he's doing it. And I understand why every teammate is going to sit there and say, I don't have a problem with it. We should kill the penalty. Time and place. You don't need to retaliate there and go crazy with it. Let them either not call anything, let them even it up out of a scrum, but do not go in and get yourself an extra 2 minutes for a team that's got 3 power play goals in the game or 2 power play goals in the game already.
Yeah, it's also been a bit of a feisty week if you don't follow Jay Fresh on Twitter. So I expected to see a little bit of a snarl out of him on Thursday night, and I'll be honest, through 3 games here, Joel Farabee was one of your better forwards, across all 3 games that we're going to talk about tonight.
Better, yes, not there yet. And
of course. And far better than he's been. But I just mean, as far as driving offense, creating plays, forecheck.
Sure, he's around it the whole game. Like he's around it, feels like the whole game. I totally agree.
And I've seen Charlie O'Connor. Shout out Charlie. Seen him talking on Twitter about the fact that at some point, Joel Farabee is going to start scoring goals again. He is a consistent enough goal scorer throughout the course of his career that it is reasonable to expect that at some point in time, they will start going in again. And maybe that started this week. What I'm saying is, over these last couple of games, I have started to see that player come back again for Joel Farabee, and that's nice to see.
Sure, but in that spot, that's a bad penalty to take.
Terrible.
It essentially goes on to cost you the game because Sam Reinhart scores on the power play. A puck shoots out to his side, net's wide open. It's as easy a goal as he'll score, and the guy's only the league leader in goals. So, like, what are you supposed to do there?
Well, and Joel Farabee came out, I believe it was the next day, and immediately took ownership and said it was a bad penalty, and said, his emotions got the best of him and he shouldn't have done it. And he said all the right things. So I do want to give him a little bit of credit for that as well.
And I understand saying all the right things. The problem there is that you turned a game where you had no right getting any points, had a point within your sights, at least 1, maybe 2. I mean, you could have also just won the game flat out, and you end up with nothing. And I don't think there was anything wrong with that on the surface, because it was a game we kind of were chalking up to, well, it's the defending Stanley Cup champs. Of course, this is going to be a tough game.
Absolutely.
But it was there. But it was there for the taking. And honestly, everything from there, like, you got into that situation where now they have to pull the goalie and they're going to try to do what they can to get the game tied. Emile Andre loses the puck, falls down, has to trip up a player just to avoid the empty netter at that stage of the thing. That puts him back on the penalty kill with under 2 minutes now. So that's game over. Yeah. And then, just for good measure, Matthew Tkachuk finally scores a goal in the game, which counts as another power play goal, by the way, for his 5th point of the night. So, pretty spot on with who I picked for the player to watch that night, because he had the biggest game out of all of them for sure.
But I feel like Matthew Tkachuk was playing in Philadelphia.
But I gotta tell you though, do you know what a 4 for 5 power play night for the opposition will do to your penalty kill? They went from 3rd in the league that game to 11th in the league the next day.
That sounds about right.
Like, that's what 4 for 5 will do. And like, look, is one of them a little bogus because it was an empty netter? Sure, I get it. Like, it wasn't going to be scored if you probably have a goalie and they're not trying to score there, but you had to do what you had to do, right, to try to get back into the game. But you're not going to have many nights like that. And I just, like, as much as everything that I'm talking about here are penalties, like Brink's interference penalty was legit. Konechny getting in on something and getting a roughing penalty afterwards as a result of that, like, and them taking 2. I understood that. Farabee's extra 2 for going in and trying to jump to the aid of a teammate. I get that one. honestly, I think one of the ones I had the biggest problem with was, Melandre trips a guy up. I understand it's a penalty. I honestly don't know why they didn't just give him the goal right there, because it happens 10 feet in front of the net.
And yeah, I think it has to be a distinct breakaway, but I get it.
Like, I'm sitting there going, well, what do you think's going to happen if he doesn't fall? He's scoring.
Of course.
Like, the guy's down and out. His stick trips him up. He can put the puck in the net if he has the ability to skate there. But whatever. But it just, when you've won 3 in a row and that snaps your 5-game point streak, you can kind of brush that off a little bit better.
Like you said, defending Stanley Cup champs
and being competitive in a game that didn't start that way, but you turned it into
fighting back into it.
Okay, that takes us to Boston.
And well, before Boston, real quick, you did set up the John Tortorella media availability situation on Thursday.
No. This wasn't the Thursday one. It was Saturday.
Well, Thursday was the day he didn't speak after the game, correct?
Oh, right.
Bradshaw come out?
Yes, yeah. Bradshaw came out. Okay, that's fair.
So we heard from Rocky Thompson about the starting goalie, and then
and all the lineup stuff and all this, all the other typical pre-game fanfare, and the thing is that literally 10 seconds earlier, we're walking to the press conference room, and they had told us Torts at the podium. And then Torts doesn't come out to the podium, and everybody's kind of like, okay, what's going on with this situation? Because there were a couple of pressing questions that people and that obviously really weren't like asked as much, because like at Bradshaw's not going to have, I think he might've been asked, but like, it's not going to be the same weight of an answer that the head coach provides, especially a head coach like John Tortorella. Because the 2 pressing questions were, the day before, Sam Emerson was cleared, so you said. So why wasn't he available? Did something happen? Right. Not even to dress for the game, by the way. So what happened there? And number 2, reaction to the Joel Farabee thing, because here's another part of the equation. Joel Farabee was originally, I guess, either requested to be spoken to after the game. That's why that happened the next day, and he talked more about it like day after. But he was asked for the night of, because taking that penalty essentially costs you the game. And I think similarly, that's what you want to ask John Tortorella too, about what's your response to what Joel Farabee did in that spot, because you're in a tie game. Every penalty you take is crucial.
And he's one of your veteran leaders at this point.
Sure.
You have in your lineup. Yeah.
That too. So none of that happens. So it's a little bit interesting, obviously, right off the bat. And you start to leaves questions. Tortorella said the day after he didn't feel like he had anything productive to say. And I think that's a precursor for Saturday, because then he had something else to say later. And I think that was a carryover.
I think John Tortorella, by not speaking on Thursday, set himself up to get a 2-fer in Boston, and I think he did.
Probably. So let's do the game first, and then we'll do
so the Philadelphia Flyers and also you shipped up to Boston for a matinee on Saturday. This is a 1:00 game. Before we get into actually breaking the game down, I want to hear a little bit of the the insider stuff from you. And I'm not talking like trade breaking insider.
No, you mean like being in the
you're in the press box. So first of all, have you traveled to cover Flyers games before? Like what arenas are on your bucket list from a coverage perspective?
Oh, from a coverage perspective, do? I don't know that I don't know that I have a bucket list per se.
I'm sorry, not bucket list, but like the checklist of what you've done so far. I'm sorry.
It's practically nothing. I normally don't go on the road, period. I mean, to me, at this
I know
point,
you typically don't.
I mean, at this point, the biggest road thing I've done was probably Stadium Series last year at MetLife. That was, or this year technically, but last season. That's what I mean.
Have you done any other NHL rings, or was this your first travel with the team?
No,
from the press box.
To travel to actually cover a game, yes. To go to another arena, no. I've been to a couple others in the past. I've been
some of the locals.
No, actually, it's been mostly far ones, Anaheim and Colorado.
Yeah, you didn't cover them, right?
No. Goodness.
No. I'm talking from coverage perspective.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's nothing.
Oh, it's literally just so. TD Garden is your first non-Wells Fargo Center press box experience,
sure.
Other than Stadium Series.
Right, which would be the link. It would be MetLife. I didn't do the Heinz
Pittsburgh.
No, because that was still that might have been like my first year doing stuff with the station, and honestly, that was like so early on.
It was so cold. I was there. It was so
Well,
cold.
as I tell people, having covered a couple of those, it wouldn't have been from where I would have been, but
Fair enough.
which is one of the only
But
reasons I feel comfortable with doing those things, because I certainly wouldn't want to sit outside for that either. Um, but
okay,
I
so
get
you told me you flew in day of and flew out day
morning.
of.
Yeah,
This was a single day travel trip for you.
yeah, got up really stupid early, to leave. Probably like I didn't realize like you try to create buffers, right? And I don't like it's December. I don't know how
You
travel's
didn't
gonna be.
realize how empty the airport was going to be at 9 a.m. on on a Saturday morning, did
No, I
you?
just didn't know what to expect with anything, honestly.
Yeah.
Like let's put it this way. I know people who because this is something that never works out for me, and at this point it may never, because there eventually this won't be like eventually coverage of this event will be going to the training center to do this, because once but people who go to the draft, because like the draft typically is a thing, because you go like people who go for the purpose of the the front office is sitting at a table on the arena floor or the sphere or whatever, right? And doing but you get them in that spot. Eventually it's going to turn into the NFL draft, where all of the people that you would need to talk to from the team are in their home facilities and the players are somewhere else. And honestly, you would just get the player maybe the next day when they flew in from wherever it is that they were doing the thing or whatever, right? So, like, I didn't go to that, but what people who went to Vegas for the draft, some of my colleagues who went had nightmare stories about getting back here, like days worth needing to, oh, this was canceled, an extra day in Vegas, got as far as maybe like, let's say Chicago, got to stay there because now something else happened. So we're
Oh,
staying there.
we're talking about leaving Vegas, like maybe the biggest tourist destination in the
Well,
country.
possibly. And I get that, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is they should be able to handle it, is what I mean.
oh, sure.
Right.
So I take stuff when it comes to flights, I take things very take things with a lot of precautions towards making sure I have ample time. I left at 7 a.m., was supposed to get there, it said at 8:30. The flight didn't even take an hour. It felt like we were up, down. The flight wasn't even full, honestly. Like
Right.
I can't I couldn't tell you the last time, and I don't fly too often, but I couldn't tell you the last time I got on a flight that wasn't full. You know what I mean? Like, so me hopping a flight that had maybe half capacity was
I think you have Saturday morning going in your favor, and also we're in that lull between Thanksgiving travel and Christmas travel.
depends on the destination though too. Like every family vacation that I've taken to Florida, the plane's full.
Yeah, nobody's vacationing to Boston in December.
Well, exactly, I guess is the point. Like for me, this is probably like someone hopping a plane up here to go for a business trip, and
Yes.
less about taking a trip, or maybe the occasional person who's going up to see family and starting with Saturday morning, let's just say. I don't know, but you get the point. um yeah, it wasn't one of those. I get that. Either way, it was super easy. I'm there and I've got like 2 hours to kill before I even can head to the arena. I probably could have taken the next flight in line, which I think would have left at 8:30.
There's no shot you would have let that happen just from a scheduling perspective. It would have
No,
made you wait. It would have made you way too nervous.
no, I would have been okay. Like knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be as much now.
Okay, well
That's what
there you
I mean.
go. It's a
It's the
valuable
past.
experience out of
Right.
you.
Because
So
because what I would have like really what I would have wanted to do was land at 9:30, 10 o'clock, like it would have been for that. Hop off, sit somewhere in the airport really quick before I head over to probably post all of my stuff, because I did save that for when I got off the plane. Um then basically immediately head over, because you can't get into the building until 2.5 hours before the game anyway. So
okay.
so that was part of the equation. That's also why I'm saying if I would have known that I would have been like had over an hour and a half to wait before I felt like I could go over there, because it's not far. The from Boston Logan Airport to TD Garden, it's less than 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's less than 10 minutes if the city cooperates.
Or it's less than 10 minutes on a Saturday morning.
Okay, I was gonna say, because trust me, I have done that, and it took me 45. So
I wouldn't have but I wouldn't have cared if I was there like at the time frame to get in when I would want to get in. You know what I mean?
I, I totally. I will say though, just respectfully to Boston fans, you know this. Your city is the worst planned city for vehicles in North America. It's awful. Anyway,
I mean, I will tell you that, and this jumps ahead from the experience part that you probably want to hear about, but the leaving process with obviously now way more people around the Garden than there would have been at 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 in the morning, and a Boston Celtics game coming in at 8 o'clock.
Well, God, you paid 3 times as much for your Uber, didn't you?
I didn't do too bad, honestly. In all seriousness, I kind of waited it out a little bit and kept the app open and kept moving around a little bit
You get what I'm saying,
until
though.
until until the rate dropped a little. But I was okay. I did okay, honestly.
Okay,
Like,
so you eventually make your way into TD
but
Garden. How did that go?
no, but what I was telling you about this was that the streets that surround that place at that time at 5 o'clock, even on with one game letting out, another game going in, I see your point 1,000%.
Do you like driving in Old City?
No,
Okay,
absolutely not.
Boston, the whole city of Boston is Old City.
It is. No, I
The
know.
whole city.
It really
Okay.
is.
Anyway, so you finally make your way into TD Garden.
Yes, I go into TD Garden. No, like I said, I've never been. So I get upstairs. I just go straight upstairs. I went straight up to the press box. I just set my stuff up and basically waited it out a little bit until the game was going to start. Because actually, by the time you get in 2.5 hours before the game starts, work your way upstairs and get everything set up. I actually looked and it was already like 11, and I'm like, oh wow, there's only 2 hours until the game. It doesn't feel that bad or whatever. And I was just kind of, again, buying time. By the time you blink and it's noon, now you're watching the clock tick down to warm-ups. You're getting all that type of stuff going on.
Were you the first one in the spots?
Pretty much, because I mean, well, let's put it this way. Think about it. If you're a local, you're not going to worry about going over there early, especially if there wasn't too much pregame.
Most of them probably live 10 minutes from the building.
Well, and I, like, full disclosure also, there is just like there is at the Wells Fargo Center, you go all the way to the top, and there is the event level floor where there's a press room and there's a meal and all that stuff like that. I didn't go to that. I was just getting my stuff. Well, I was just getting my stuff set up, and I am positive that so many other people were probably just there for the whole pregame.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? Especially when you consider, like, nobody spoke on the Flyer side pregame. Joe Sacco spoke prior to the game for Boston, so that was like 10:15 in the morning, I want to say, something like that, or something like that. Something early, something like 10, maybe 10:45, something like that, right? And people are filing in. Like, I wasn't the first one in the press box, like, setting stuff up. I could see, there were definitely PR members running around. There were tech people. They were doing all the usual tests that you get in the building before a game starts. As people start to filter in, I was one of 5 people there who were covering from the visiting side of things. So it was a pretty exclusive group of us who were there for this one. We're just sitting there waiting for the game to start, and you're watching. And honestly, something that's really interesting to me, and I don't know if it's just the way that the arena is set up, and I'm saying from the outside actually in this case, because it's tucked in, right? Like, it's also part of the train station that's there. It's tucked in where there's other, where I took a picture and posted of the Bobby Orr statue out front. There's things around it. There's a restaurant in the corner. There's a Starbucks there. There's like all sorts of stuff all over the place. And I think people hang out outside a lot pregame, because it was like noon and it looked like the inside of Wells Fargo Center for a Flyers game on a Tuesday.
It's a great preview for you on that new Sixers arena, because it's going to be real similar. It's just going to be right in the middle. Right. Of course, I'm not
assuming everything happens as they plan it, but
I'm making a joke. I know. But yes, that's part of that city just being so old, and they just crammed a building anywhere they could cram a building.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, so everything kind of moves pretty quickly, and everything gets going, and next thing you know, we're at the start of the game, and it's time to go. So we dive into the game experience of it, and the first period was a lot of fun for Flyers fans, I guess, right? I mean, power play goal, and then another goal for the rookie. The last 2 goals he'll score as a 19-year-old.
Okay.
But, yeah. I mean, he was like, and they'd already played there once before this season. A game I didn't go to. It was on a Tuesday night in October. Like, a little bit harder to navigate that. And
Although, like you said, now that you know, it's pretty easy.
well, there's other logistics with that.
I know.
But it was like watching him take over a game. He's in the right spots at the right time both times, and he just, Michkov just is delivering goals for them. They get on the board with the power play goal. They get on the board again, and it's late in the period, so they're going to carry a 2-0 lead through the first period. And this does not feel like Flyers in Boston material. Typically, this does not happen, which makes the rest of the game, unfortunately, like as we get into it, like even the second period. Okay, Boston gets a power play and they score on the power play. It's 2-1. Okay, Boston's on the board. By the way, right before Trent Frederick does score there on a rebound in front, Alexei Kolosov makes one of the better saves you're going to see this season from a Flyers goalie on Morgan Geekie.
And unfortunately, he gives up a goal 6 seconds later, so you're never going to see it again. But
right.
if that puck just gets cleared out of the zone, that's on highlight reels. If he smothers it up and gets a whistle there, that's on highlight reel.
Well, he had no way to smother it. It was bad or nothing.
You know what I mean.
Oh no, I know what you mean. I'm saying
if he can find a way to, get in front of the shot and it somehow doesn't go in.
Now I'm gonna combine the two things that you like to hear about right now, because I'm gonna combine the experience portion for me with the game part.
Okay.
My angle sitting at TD Garden is not going to be the same as it would have been at Wells Fargo Center. The press box is built a little differently, where the broadcast booths still align with center ice, the blue lines, all that type of stuff, like they would anywhere else. So do the management booths. So management has booths that are lined up along basically that straight stretch. So
there's really wants to see every inch of the ice surface.
But they give the Flyers that though too. The visiting management that too. No. The visiting you know where the visiting, you know what I mean? Like right. So
get whatever suite's left over.
No, not in Philly. They put them all the way down the opposite end of the press box on the other side of all the booths.
That's funny.
So they're sitting down their end of the whole, the whole arena basically, where they're in front of their bench, and that's how it would be. So we're more in the corner looking. And so I'm almost looking straight at the net, almost like I'm looking. If you put me in the Ovechkin spot, like I'm aligned with the Ovechkin sight line.
You're staring right down.
I'm staring right down that left corner of the net, and I saw the amount of net that I saw the amount of net that Morgan Geekie had to shoot at, and I thought a goal was coming. And that pad shot out, and he got it. And we couldn't believe he got it. And
it was a hell of a save.
And I didn't. And the sad part was like I didn't even see the puck go in the net for the goal, because I was trying to type out as quickly as I could. Holy smokes, what a save! And then I heard the roar of the crowd, and it was in. Yep. Now the rest of the period goes on, and they maintain this 5-on-5 push. They play pretty well. Cam York gets a goal in the final 5 minutes. You get your 2-goal lead back. You're going to go to the third period. It's 3-1. You feel pretty good about the way you've played for 2 periods.
Well, it's 3-1 lead in Boston after 2.
Right. Now, you don't love the fact that in the first period you took 2 penalties, but you survived it. And the second period, you actually did pretty well, all things considered, because you had a couple of situations where, like, you took 3 penalties in the second period. Only one of them was
resulted in a penalty kill
that you got scored on.
Wow.
Actually, as a matter of fact, I have to throw in here too. It wasn't just that you got scored on. That power play goal was a 4-on-3 power play. Because they kept it at 5-on-4.
No, it was a 5-on-4.
No, I'm sorry, that's right. They
offset them.
Well, and it was because there was already a penalty kill going on. That's also
there's already manpower. Right.
Yeah, right. So I'm reading the box score. I'm like, I wasn't thinking about it for a second.
Right.
And then you get a power play late in the period after you had scored to make it 3-1, because Charlie McAvoy trips up Michkov, then starts kind of trying to bully him around a little bit, pops him a little bit. Michkov goes down. Tippett doesn't like it, goes in and defends his teammate. They get 2 each for roughing. They gave.
By the way, when you say pops him a little bit, you mean hits a clean uppercut with a gloved hand. Anyway, continue. Anyway, a guy who's essentially on his hands and knees, but whatever. I'm glad Charlie McAvoy is tough.
Well, he was on a mission to hit anything that moved, because he also drills Konechny later in the game in the third period, and that was
USA.
Who, McAvoy?
Yeah.
I would be shocked if he did.
I assume he did, right? Yeah.
I mean, I didn't go crazy.
Yeah, none of the Flyers made it, so I don't really care.
Well, on
And,
Team USA. That's what I was gonna say. I'm like,
we talked about it last week, by the way. So just since we're here, we don't need to do a whole bit on it. But Sanheim, Konechny made Team Canada. Ristolainen made Team Finland. It's about what we expected. Anyway.
Right. He is on. Yes, he's on Team USA. By the way.
Yeah. So
someone
had a big tough guy week.
What I just don't like about situations like that is that at some point in time, like I'll scroll back through the box score really quick. Frederick from Lowry and Geeky in the second period. We'll get to the third. I don't see Charlie McAvoy's name pop up anywhere else on this box score in anything else. At some point in time, are you interested in playing hockey or are you interested in playing volleyball? And he wasn't interested. He was absolutely 1,000% not interested. And
Charlie McAvoy did not show up to TD Garden on Saturday to play a hockey game.
He
showed up to intimidate a teenager.
I think more than that, honestly, because he
okay, but we all know what mission statement number 1 was.
Probably,
especially after the and I wonder how much of that directive or motivation, whatever you want to call it, came after the first period, right? When he puts 2 up on you in your building. I wonder if Charlie McAvoy's kind of wires.
Well, I just think that from the second he went down, they didn't like it. That bench was up, they were vocal, and that's probably what sets the whole stage for everything else. You can I understand all the people who are going to throw that clip out and go, well, based on what we're going to talk about in a few seconds about, well, why is that not the same thing? Look, he has 2 hands on a stick. He makes contact with his legs. The guy falls down. I'm not going to I'm not here to dispute the calls that are about to come either. Mostly. There's one of them I will. There's 2 that I won't. I can't. They're bad penalties. There's penalties you don't take in the third period against that team in that building.
I agree with you that the Flyers took some bad penalties. I will say, and I expressed this to you via text, it was a similar thing with the Florida Panthers game. It's not so much about what you call on the Flyers that John Tortorella is upset about. It's
what you don't call at the other end.
What you don't call on the Atlantic Division teams. Because that's the common thread here, right? Well, and 2 of the more well-connected teams if you're talking about league politics, but that's probably not. It might be relevant.
But I think that's what everybody's looking for. Like, there comes a certain point. Like, I'm not denying, and I'm jumping a little bit far ahead here, but
yeah.
Sean Couturier takes the last penalty of regulation.
Yeah,
it's not that it's not a penalty. But you've let stuff go. No, but you've let stuff go on one side. You've called a bunch of stuff on the other side. And at some point in time, especially for a game of that atmosphere, because I'll tell you right now, the entire third period felt like a playoff game. That crowd was into it. That crowd was going nuts. It did not feel like 2 teams that are trying to battle for wild card position right now. It felt like playoffs. And I'm sorry, at some point in time, put the damn whistle away. Put it away and let these 2 teams battle it out. You've got your situation in front of you. It's a tie game at that point. Let them play.
Well, and if you're going to let them play, and I don't necessarily disagree with you there, you have to let both teams play.
Right, and and this is what I'm saying. I understand that the penalty I'm talking about at the end is a penalty. I'm not saying it's not. What I'm frustrated about from that situation is that at that point in time, you've had such a lopsided number of penalties for one side versus the other that it feels like now you're almost just playing it up to the crowd at this point.
Don't pretend like the Boston Bruins played, Wayne Gretzky, Lady Bing hockey the whole game. Like, let's be honest. They're the Boston Bruins.
Right. Like, this game, it was a walking scrum.
Right. And okay. If you want to argue that it was about even, okay, sure, cool. We can have that discussion. We can have that the physicality, the fouls after the whistle, the whatever terminology you want to use. There is no world in which that game ends with the penalty discrepancy it does. Like, if this game's being called fairly, and even if it's not being called fairly, we know the NHL loves a good even-up call. Like, the NHL loves a good even-up call.
Well, I'm going to tell you,
why were penalty minutes 16-8?
Well, guess what? That's I think it was the first Cam York penalty if I'm not mistaken, in the first period, because that comes after Boston had taken one, and right away there was an issue. And it was like it's 29 seconds after that penalty was called. It was a blatant makeup call. And listen, I hate that we're having this conversation about, first of all, about a game in December. I hate we're having this conversation. Secondly, I hate we're having this conversation because it mars what was otherwise a really good game, playoff atmosphere in the building, playoff physicality, playoff intensity, where these teams were going at each other after every whistle. It was as entertaining and intense a game as this team has played all season.
You
And
had
we're talking
production.
about,
You had production out of superstars. Matvey Michkov scored 2. Brad Marchand scored 1. Like, we had our
Bruins
stars
finally
showing up.
looking
It was
right.
a
The Bruins
playoff
looking
game.
like the Bruins finally, with like some of their guys coming into play. You're right, like all that. And the story kind of becomes all about the officiating at the end of it.
Yep.
And so, like, let's get back to the third period for a minute, because before we even get to any penalties that get called in the period, they already cut the lead to 1. Frederick scores again. It's really a shame, because the more I've watched the clip of this goal, it's a good defensive play by Nick Seeler, and the bounce just goes over his
Yeah.
stick right into the perfect spot. Kolosov is overplaying it because he thinks the pass is going through. He doesn't anticipate the partially blocked pass, and then it just sits right, so it's a bad bounce. Frederick's in the right spot. He's played, in particular, I got to check, because I know Boston, nobody scored for Boston when the Flyers went up there the first time. That was a shutout win.
Did Matvey Michkov score in that game too? Has he scored 3 goals in 2 games in Boston?
No.
Okay, I thought he might have. Okay.
No, who the hell was it that scored in that game? I know that Joel Farabee scored into an empty net to make it 2-0. I want to say Tyson Forster had the goal that got them on the board. And it was early, and they really held that one, like they held the 1-0 lead until there was like 20 seconds left.
You're
Anyway, or something, it was something like that. Anyway, so now that it's a 1-goal game, and then you're going to start playing power play for Boston, like we're talking right after they score, here comes an interference penalty on Konechny, who not too long earlier had taken the big hit we're talking about from McAvoy. So he goes to sit in the box. This comes at a perfect time for them to have, like, they do an ice scrape. It's a TV timeout. While that's going on, they come over, they pull him out of the box, and Bobby Brink serves the penalty. Konechny goes straight up the tunnel. He's getting pulled by the concussion spotter. His helmet had popped off on the hit, and he was kind of,
It kind of seemed like the kind of hit you would call a penalty on, but it's crazy that they didn't happen to see it, even though it was right in front of the net with the puck.
He kind of got sandwiched a little bit, which is also part of it. Like, it looked like a mass collision of bodies. It just looked like a bad situation all around, and more than anything, it was just the helmet popping off that really was what made you worried about it. So Konechny's gone at this point. He's not on the bench. He's not able to help with any of this. And you kill off the penalty, and now about 2 minutes after you kill off that penalty, this is the one that I think people are really talking about when it comes down to it. Because Garnet Hathaway brings his stick up, kind of taps the hip of Mason Lowry, and Lowry falls like a ton of bricks. And it's not even a matter of, like, the act, honestly. It's not. Is he trying to, is he turning up ice? Is he on his edges? Could he go down? Sure. I'm not denying that. And does he get tapped? Yes. The problem with the call is it came about 3 seconds after the bench and the crowd decided, wait, did you just see that? And the official goes, oh, yeah, I did see it. Let's call it a penalty.
Let's put an arm up.
With the penalty discrepancy already at 4-2. Or power play at that point at 4-2. So that's going to be the 5th power play of the game for the Bruins on something that was called 3 seconds late.
Well, and again, with what you haven't called, with the precedents you've established in this game, it's tough to let the crowd influence. Like, here's the thing: if you don't see it, you can't call it. You can't call it 3 seconds later because the crowd got mad about it.
Well,
you especially can't do that when the discrepancy is where it's at.
Well, and guess what? I'm not even, like, the crowd's what we all hear because they're louder than everything else, obviously. I can tell you where the official was standing when he called the penalty, and he's standing right in earshot of the Boston bench.
Of course.
So I'm sure he got a yell, like someone yelled about it, and then he put the arm up.
And yeah, And it's unfortunate, and it's one of those things that some nights it's going to go your way, sometimes it's not going to go your way. It's unfortunate.
So they kill that one off too somehow. By the way, during the course of these penalty kills, by the way, Boston is getting chances galore. Kolosov for having a terrible game on Thursday is having a brilliant game this afternoon on this particular game.
Absolutely.
And you get down to it, and I'm going to tell you right now that the reason what happened next did not surprise me, because I'm sitting there going, I've seen this movie before. The game in Boston, the game that you're hanging on to that lead, and the game where you're just waiting for the one chance that does what it does, right? And Brad Marchand gets the step and goes in and knows what to do with the puck on a breakaway and puts it right through Kolosov's legs and ties the game.
I didn't know he was allowed to do that when the game's not on TNT.
Oh no, he's done it plenty of times before. I've seen this movie. I've seen this movie before, and the fact that it's a tie game is bad enough. Then you take another penalty with 1:57 left in regulation. That is now creating a situation where, again, you had a lead in the third period, and a power play with less than 2 minutes left might cost you any points. So at least they kill that off, right? At least they kill that off to get to overtime. And there's 3 seconds left on it. Now, by the way, here's something else I want to point out about the 3 penalties in the third period. Travis Konechny, Garnet Hathaway, Sean Couturier. They all have something in common, don't they? They all kill penalties. So now your penalty kill's out of whack because you have one player who would be out there sitting in the penalty box. Konechny's not back by this point anyway, because, or he is back, but he's not playing. We'll get to that. And now you've got Couturier in the box. So you're going to now start the overtime. And I understood it a little bit when they started the overtime with, I think it was Poehling, Cates, or it was Poehling and 2 defensemen or something like that. I understand
you're trying Poehling and 2 defensemen because Brink was coming out of the box.
No, that was Couturier coming out of the box.
Oh, it was Couturier coming out. You're right.
So I get it. So another forward's coming out, and it's going to be 4-on-4. I get it. And it didn't take long after they got out there. I think it was 30 seconds into the overtime at 4-on-4 that they get Michkov out there. They get like that kind of group out there, and you're like, okay, but still no Konechny and things like that. And this is where, look, I hope we're right talking about Joel Farabee and that scoring a goal maybe finally unlocks something for him going forward. If it would have been in this spot, it would have been perfect.
It would have been enormous.
He ends up with the game on his stick, and he gets stopped by Jeremy Swayman. And it's just how it goes. You know, you would have loved to have seen it right there. That was their best chance. And then you end up with Owen Tippett and Tyson Forster on the ice, and Rasmus Ristolainen's the defenseman. And David Pastrnak wins a corner battle, basically gets positioning on Forster first, then wins it away from Tippett, beats Tippett to the front of the net. Forster comes over to play Pastrnak because, one, he's David Pastrnak. He's dangerous in overtime. And Pavel Zacha actually lost his stick in the corner. So he's picking up his stick and then just happens to go to the perfect spot where he's going to be ready for the cross crease pass and buries it. And that's the game, and that was the game. And unfortunate, frustrating. And you think that we're going to talk about at that point that they've lost another game by losing a lead in the third period. And this one's kind of like, this one's worse. You had a 2-goal lead, and yes, the penalties were a problem and things like that, but it's, you lose a 2-goal lead.
Yes.
And that's what you think the story is going to be. Sure.
And that's what you think your head coach is probably going to be the most upset about.
Until
because now, like you said, 2 games in a row, you had a lead in the third period.
Well, and he didn't speak after the last one, so
right. So you assume it's all kind of building up, and it's definitely building up for John Tortorella. And
yeah, we're gonna get into it. So
you get one of your classic little torch explosions here.
Yep, here we go.
Yeah, let me start. Okay. One thing I teach my team to do is not dive. Maybe I should start teaching them that. The way this has gone here, the way goes on, maybe I should start teaching them how to dive.
Obviously, penalties a factor today, but 5-on-5, were you happy with the body of work, especially in the first
I thought
period?
we played our ass off. Yes, I thought we played really well.
When you feel like that, like you just said, you those comments you made. What does it mean to you, especially defending your guys like that you feel like maybe something was stolen from you guys tonight?
Yeah, I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's one of the things we talk about most as a team. We're going to play an honest game. There's no cheating. There's no embarrassing referees. You don't embarrass the referees. And that went on here tonight is just ridiculous. So I'm proud of the way our team played. Did we piss another one away? Yeah. But other people had a little bit to do with that also.
Was TK pulled by the spotter there?
He was pulled by the spotter and I stopped playing. He's undisciplined. He's just too undisciplined.
So there you go. That's John Tortorella post game.
You know, we're 25, 28 games into the season, something like that. We're less than 30 games into the season, and there is our early front runner. I don't think it's going to stick. There is our early front runner for Torts Presser of the Year. Now, we have plenty of time, but, you know, we have an early run there. Also, shout out. Hi, Charlie. I know we mentioned you earlier in the show. I recognize that voice anywhere.
He wasn't there. What are you talking about?
That wasn't him?
No. Who are you thinking?
Man, the first question, I could have sworn that was Charlie.
No, the first question, that's Brian Smith, who works for the Flyers.
I apologize to Brian Smith.
By the way, we were all laughing at afterwards because Torts comes in. He usually asks the first question because he's the one he's holding the team microphone. Also, he asked the first question kind of.
Is that why Torts came in with, I'm starting?
Well, no, he usually just asks the first question, and Torts goes, no, let me start. And Brian just goes, okay.
You're not going to tell Torts no, but so we will talk about that little last sentence in a little bit here. The Travis.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Travis Konechny element in a minute because that, truly, I think that's a piece that gets lost in the sauce from everything else.
I agree, because obviously the big stuff that comes out here is the I don't teach my guys to dive. In fact, I teach them not to dive. You go out there and you don't embarrass the refs, and kind of that whole little message out of Torts. And
now, do you recall the thing I sent the group yesterday?
I don't. I can look at it, but
no, you don't know. You don't need it right away.
Okay.
I was fully convinced that the next practice that the Flyers have then is going to be John Tortorella doing his best. His best Gordon Bombay. Take the fall, act hurt, get indignant.
The fall, act hurt.
Because that you tell me that's not what you hear from. Maybe I should start teaching him how to dive.
Yeah. So I texted our group chat, this famous group chat that we talk about all the time here, and I said, "Oh man, John Tortorella is so getting fined." Now, I didn't hear anything, and I don't necessarily think anything's coming out of this, at least publicly.
Probably not.
But I think. And upon listening to that again, so the first time I heard it, it was kind of wrapped up in the emotion 20 minutes after the game, whatever. Now that I've had a little time to sit and think and hear it again with a little bit of context.
Right.
I think the thing that kept John Tortorella from getting fined.
Assuming it's something that we don't know.
Of course. Was that the target of his ire was the Boston Bruins and not the refs.
I disagree with you a little bit. Like, that is the target of his ire, but I think that the reason why I think that something would happen is because you still use the trigger word in that by saying you don't embarrass the referees.
Yeah. Right. But he's not saying that. I don't think he's saying that the refs did anything wrong here. I think he's saying that the Bruins are running around and embarrassing the referees.
But I know, because I think I'm sorry. I also take his reaction to the Hathaway penalty and go, no, you're sitting here saying, how do you call that? How do you call that situation? Like, you're like, and again, it's I think it's a hand-in-hand exchange with that. It's, if that's a dive on the Bruins part, you're embarrassing the official by making that a situation where it's the bench jumps up, the crowd goes nuts, the official makes the call, and you're letting that all influence the officials, and it's a joke. And that's what he's trying to say, I think. And to me, I like, if he didn't say anything about the officials and just said, like, if he wanted to tee off on just the Bruins and go, I don't teach my team to dive, maybe I should, for the way that went.
He just left it there.
Right. Like,
I get that. What I'm saying is I think John Tortorella has been around a very long time. John Tortorella has, I assume, had many, many, many calls with the league about things he has said and done. I think he has a pretty good idea at this point how to get his message across without getting suspended, without getting fined. And obviously not fully, because we saw him get suspended last year.
Last year that didn't happen.
But I wonder if he learned some lessons out of that.
You know,
But I think
it's funny, by the way. It wasn't this particular game, but Wes McCauley's been known to do a big chunk of Boston games. Would have been funny if he would have been one of the guys out there for this, because
has he done a Flyers game this year?
yes, he did the oh my goodness, which game was it? St. Louis?
Okay. Well, I was about to wonder if maybe there was a distancing happening there on purpose, but
No, I don't think it's anything like that. It's wherever they're going to be, kind of thing. It is what it is.
But,
He hasn't done one in Philly, as far as I know. I'll give you that. But
so
first,
do you want? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, so go ahead. Ask your question first.
Well, I was going to get into the back half of the content and go to Travis Konechny. So if there's
no,
I want to stay on the penalties, absolutely.
I want to stay on this for 1 second.
Yeah.
Because the real thing to me about this type of press conference is, now I've been covering a John Tortorella coached Flyers team. This is the 3rd season.
Yep.
This is the first time I can remember him coming in wanting the first word. We've had pressers under a minute. We've had pressers where the questions are dumb, one word answers. The questions are dumb.
We've had I'm not answering your questions.
We've had him answer a question without any words and just go.
Yep.
We've had that happen. We have not had this, which a lot of times, like the way that, like, when we were talking about it go back upstairs after the game, I referred to it as the, like, he comes in and usually it's, I know you got a job to do. I'm not taking questions. We just sucked. And it's usually in criticism of his own team.
Hey, it's not you guys. It's right.
He wanted to send a message. I think it was a message brewing from Thursday. It was only escalated by the fact that they lost another game.
So you would say that message was Bruin?
No, I would say it's Bruin. All right. Something.
Sorry, I had to.
Something was definitely brewing for John Tortorella with that.
Trouble was brewing in Boston on Saturday. Okay.
Sure. So
there's our title.
Yeah, I was gonna say something brewing was where I think you were going with that. So yes. It just was, but it was just one of those deals, right? Okay, like he aired it all out right there. I mean, for doing, and funny enough, by the way, that's not the first time we're going to hear about officiating this weekend. It comes up again. Do we want to, I guess we want to go to Utah at this point? Or
yeah, we do have
for me before.
Well, I did want to talk about the Travis Konechny.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did want to get to that. So that clip that we played here, John Tortorella admits. And there's the second question about, what happened to Travis Konechny. Was he pulled by the concussion spotters? And John Tortorella says that he was pulled by the concussion spotters, but then he was indeed available, towards the back half of that game.
Right, and then I stopped playing him.
I stopped playing him.
He was too undisciplined. He's just too undisciplined. That's what he said. And I understand that. I understand players being undisciplined. I understand the number of penalties that have happened, especially in the 3rd period of the last 2 games that you had just played and lost after having leads. I understand all of it. Here is my one problem with this situation, and I'll see if you agree with me, but here's my problem with it. You've got a head coach here who is as insistent as he is upon it's a rebuild and we have to be patient, we have to do this right and all that stuff, who insists upon trying to win games, that we're out there to try to win games. We're not going to lose. We're not going to tank. We're not going to do this and that, right? I don't know how you go into an overtime and knowingly, in a game that you still have a chance to have despite losing the lead, sit your best player.
Especially when you lost your last game and you're...
If I go in and pull up the ice times of overtime, it's insane. Well, Konechny obviously gets 0. And Michkov, I think, had one shift that sandwiched the start at 4-on-4, like
into the 3-on-3.
Well, going back to 4-on-4 because there was 3 seconds of 4-on-3. He comes out for it, and he never played. Like Michkov, like this is another part of it that makes no sense. You get a whistle with 3:30 left that gets you to 3-on-3 in the first place. That's where Michkov comes back out next. It's got to be, and he never saw the ice at 3-on-3 as far as I could tell. How does that happen?
But back to your point on benching Konechny. What I think John Tortorella probably saw, or at least let's not say that. I don't want to presume to know what he's thinking, but here's what I see.
I never want to do that. So
well, that's what I'm saying, John. I'm sorry. I think he's looking at this and going, okay, we just got points in 5 straight games. We took the defending champs to their limit on Thursday night, and we lost that game because, okay, and again, this is oversimplifying it, but we lost that game because Joel Farabee takes a stupid penalty with 2 minutes left. And again, I know I'm oversimplifying that a little bit. And then he looks at it on Saturday and goes, okay, well, we're playing another decent team. This isn't, this isn't a bad team. The Bruins are solid, even if they're struggling a little bit so far. And I have another veteran leader on my team doing this same clown show stuff late in the third period. And I think he's looking at it and going, okay, Joel's been playing pretty good. He's had a bit of a feisty day. I get where that one's coming from. Travis Konechny 2 games in a row. He wears a letter. We got to put a stop to this. And again, I agree with you that I think it might have very well cost you a point in that game.
It could. There's no guarantees it will or won't.
Of course. But you're not putting yourself in the best situation to win if your best or second best forward is fully unavailable because you just don't want to play him.
Because it goes back to what we talked about 2 weeks ago. What the hell even are they? Are they bottom feeders who are trying to get a good draft pick, or not trying, like, you know what I mean? Who are going to because they can't win games, or are they able to win games like this? Like, that's a winnable game in that spot, and you're taking one of your best players, and like, it wouldn't have been it probably isn't as good of it probably still isn't a good enough excuse, but you could have said, I didn't want to put him out there because he took a beating. Yes, he came back from the concussion spotter, but they were playing a style I didn't want him out there in December. Case in point, absolutely. Done deal. And that could be a reason. No, you pinned it on he was undisciplined, and I'm teaching him a lesson.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's where I think John Tortorella is coming from here, right? Like I said, you've seen 2 veteran leaders take undisciplined penalties in the last 5 minutes of the third period, right? That's not, the puck rode up on my stick, so I flipped it out of play, or I hooked a guy and he called it a ticky-tacky slash. Like, these are undisciplined, bad penalties that, as veteran leaders in close late games, you shouldn't be taking.
Well, no, and that's one of the biggest problems that you should have with both of these, with all of these games that they played this week. Penalties were a problem, and they didn't take many. They didn't take many of them on Sunday. I'll give them that. But these other 2, it's way too many. 5 power plays for Florida, 6 power plays for Boston. Can't happen. Not against those teams. You're not near good enough to be able to give them upwards of 10 to 12 minutes of power play time and think that you're not going to get scored on.
No, I agree. And even against, it's like I said, even though Boston has struggled, if you keep giving the Brad Marchands and David Pastrnak's a crack at the apple, eventually they're going to get you. Now, right. I know they didn't in this game. It was Trent Frederick, but you keep giving team bites at the apple, they're going to burn you eventually. But all right, let's talk about this Utah game real quick.
I can do this one. I feel like in 5 minutes or less.
Go for it.
Honestly,
absolutely.
This game was boring.
Man, I am so glad you said that, because I was sitting here thinking that the whole game, and I'm like, man, I know the last 2 games have been like a lot of fun. Am I jaded, or is this game just bad?
No, and it's okay, and it's part of where I'm coming from with like I feel like most of the week it was like watching preseason style hockey. Like, everything, the chaos of Thursday against Florida, all the goals, all the penalties, all the loose play, no structure. It kind of got that way in Boston. It was a very the physicality in Boston too kind of preaches to that style too, because it would be guys maybe trying to make a statement for themselves. I'm going to do something. I'm getting in a scrum. I'm standing up for a guy because I have to. That might be my only way of making the team. I got to do this. And then the officials just feeding into, let's call as many penalties as possible during the course of the game.
Well, and Boston is still auditioning for a new head coach a little bit, right? Like, when a new coach comes in, everything shakes out.
Are they playing now? I don't know if they're playing tonight or not. Which it doesn't matter. But
I don't believe so.
They didn't play. I'm saying they didn't play yesterday, which as a result meant that as of winning the game on Saturday, they were 7-2 since Joe Sacco took over. So has it had the desired effect? Has it had the desired effect? Absolutely.
Totally.
Whether it's intended to like that or not, like it could have been something else, but I was and part of I'm trying to remember whether or not this was said on like the Nesson feed at some point or something like that, or maybe it was just something that was relayed on the local feed here. But something about how a lot of the veterans on Boston really like shouldered the events of Jim Montgomery getting fired and the idea that this is on us. We've got to play better, whatever. They mentioned, Jim Jackson at one point mentions how Marchand had, or maybe Bush was the one who mentioned Marchand had 3 surgeries in the offseason. So it's like it was going to take time. Maybe now he's finding it again after a couple months. Exactly. You know what I mean? So there's an element where so there's an element where I get it. And like all that stuff happens. The Utah game had the same kind of preseason-y vibe to it because it was sloppy. It was just like it didn't have any. It felt like a game kind of had no juice to it, no flow to it. It was 2 teams that had played the day before early enough that it shouldn't have, but it just didn't really have that kind of. I don't want to say that the first period felt like that. The second period, all of a sudden, the ice was broken and the goals came in a bunch, and then the third period felt like that lockdown mode that not a lot's happening until the big thing happened that took them right out of the game. Which you should be in a situation where something has the potential to happen. You're on a power play. There's less than 6 minutes to go when that comes through. It's shaping up to give you the opportunity. This is also in a third period, by the way, where within, what was it? The first 2 minutes of the period, I think it was, that you think you score the tying goal and then they take it away for goalie interference. And which here's the thing. Nobody knows what it is, but I actually felt like
when you see that.
No, but I actually felt like that was an easy call because the one consistent element of the last several calls I've seen for goalie interference has been if you go into the crease untouched, they're calling it back. And Konechny goes into the crease untouched, and that's where that comes from. So
when you put yourself in position to be there, they're not going to let you get away with it.
Unless you get pushed in. Like, here, perfect example. In the Boston game, when Cam York scores, Jeremy Swayman looks to the official right after the puck goes in because a stick hit him in the face. And he's looking around like, did anybody see that? I just got hit. And he got hit because Couturier gets pushed. So they're sitting there going, nothing we can do about that. Ask your teammate. He pushed a guy. Like, it's incidental. He's getting knocked over. He falls into you. Nothing we can do about that. But this was pretty textbook for what it's been this year. Now, Joel Farabee didn't agree with that. Joel Farabee thinks that goalies just get to throw their head back now, and that's it. It's a goalie interference. And
watch a game.
Well, he's entitled. I know, very funny. He is entitled to that opinion, and I understand where his opinion comes from because it feels like what they're trying. Like his point is, you're taking away that space from everybody. He's not necessarily in. Like it's not like he was in his face. Like it's not like he bumped his head or bumped him backwards that he fell over. He kind of is tying up his stick a little bit. That's about all that there really was there. But he's there, and I understand where that. So I understand where that comes from. I don't understand. It's just that was a big call in the game, obviously. And then you get to the power play part where Morgan Frost just has a mistake that can't happen. Like John Tortorella said, probably will never happen again for him because it just is one of those bad moments. But
yeah, it's unfortunate to see Adam Morgan Frost, and we've been critical of him on the show, and many
a lot of people have
been critical of him online, and he is a very popular flyer to criticize at the moment.
Well, and that's like I knew exactly what was gonna like. First of all, there's also those moments where like, 'cause let's do it this way, we're not talking about it if it's not a goal.
Of course,
right?
It's a bad turnover, and we go, ooh. But if it's not a goal, it doesn't essentially salt the game away.
If Sam Ersson makes a save there, and I'm not saying he's expected to by any stretch, what I'm trying to get at is that if he makes a save there and they still have time and an opportunity to go down and score to to tie the game, then you're not worried about it as much. But it's one of those things that as soon as you recognize what's about to happen and realize that the puck is past him, that Stenlund's going to get to it first, all of that, you're immediately thinking, oh, it's going to be a goal. Oh,
Oh,
it's
the
gonna be
second
a goal.
the second I saw Morgan Frost overskate that puck,
It's gonna be a goal.
it's in the back of the net.
Yep.
It's in the back of the net because and Sam Emerson shouldn't be expected to make a save on that because you said it was Stenlund, right?
Yeah,
He
it's
gets the puck and takes 2 strides and he's right there. Like it's not.
Sure.
He doesn't have far to go. Urshan doesn't have a whole lot of time to get in position, get set, get in front of it.
Right. Absolutely.
But I do think, yes, that they are professional athletes. Yes, they make millions of dollars, etc. All of that. That's one of those burn the tape, just simply call it a mulligan.
That's really
Every
funny.
every player is going to have one of those in their career.
That's really
right?
funny. That's really funny you say that because that's how the group chat started the week off. I said that the Thursday game was everybody just burns the whole tape, everything about it. Like, yes, I know you scored 5 goals, you gave up 7. It's a game. You take that and you chuck it out the window because it's like for everybody's part, for everything, for the officials, for both teams, for the goalies. Get rid of it.
It was a tough week.
And
But
that's you're right. That's a moment that like you have no choice but to flush it. I'm sure Morgan Frost, I hope, can't wait to play Tuesday to kind of see if there's a way he can make a better impact on it.
And hopefully Columbus provides you a little bit of opportunity, being not
Well,
necessarily the best team in the league.
Are we pretty much out of the Utah game at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, because I want to bring up something about this Columbus game that could make things really interesting for the conversations we were having a week ago after a 3-game winning streak and the conversations we're having now. Because if Pittsburgh plays Colorado tomorrow night on Tuesday and the Flyers play Columbus, if the Flyers lose in regulation and Pittsburgh gets a point, they're in last place in the Metro again.
Right. Okay.
Now, granted, if they win the game, and especially in regulation, but if they win the game, they're possibly in 4th place in the Metro by the end of the night. Like, it's
I was going to say, as we sit here recording on Monday evening, show will probably come out on Tuesday morning here. We are also about 5.5 minutes away from the Chicago Blackhawks beating the New York Rangers.
Yeah,
which is also relevant for that divisional wild card discussion there, because the Rangers currently hold the 2nd wild card spot.
I got to tell you right now, I'm about to put that on, by the way, over my shoulder. So like people ignore, if you're watching on the video feed, ignore me putting this on television.
It's okay. We'll be wrapping up shortly anyway, so you can get to that game. But
I would just stream it, but it's an NHL Network game tonight.
Right.
So I have no choice. By the way, that's a very interesting game for the Rangers because that's a team that really needs a win somewhere. Just traded away their captain.
Yep.
Just
for almost nothing. Like the fact that you got Urho Vanakainen and also some cap space, a pick or two. But
I think for the situation, I think the Rangers did good because you got rid of the contract. That was the bigger
and it was a guy you were probably gonna waive. No, I get that.
That's why I think they did well. It was
let me look at when the Rangers next.
And to be honest, I don't know what the hell Trouba brings to Anaheim. More physicality to play alongside Radko Gudas, I suppose, but that's
I'm gonna hit you with something.
Mm-hmm.
Devils lost the Rangers lost last Monday 5-1 to the Devils.
Yep.
They beat the Penguins on Friday. They lost to Seattle on Sunday night. If they lose to Chicago on Monday night, I think Peter Laviolette's job is on the line in Buffalo on Wednesday.
That's where I was going with this. Is that?
And I know I mentioned that on last week's show or 2 weeks ago. Man, John Tortorella might get some cushion on that American wins thing.
Well, that's exactly where I was about to go. Was there was an element where this game feels like there were people saying that it felt like a must because of where this is going at this point. Now you reached the boiling point with your captain, had to trade him away. It was nearly a waiver situation. You
immediately turned around and signed Igor Shesterkin to $1 billion, which as a goalie, I hope that works out for you.
Sure, of course, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like there's a lot. Like kind of sometimes if you think there's a lot going on in Flyerland sometimes, and it's been a week, it's been a month out for the Rangers at this point.
It's been a month in the last week for the Rangers.
Speaking of which, by the way, to answer your question, or sort of answer your question, because you had started this off with me going to the Garden in Boston. MSG is on the radar for later this year as well, by the way. I was going to say that was the next one, but that's not true actually, because there's a because
Kevin Durso, NHL insider here.
Well,
Kevin Durso, beat reporter.
Well, because let's put this way, in terms of favorable, and I'm not doing a ton, but in terms of favorable travel, it really doesn't, like, if I was able to pull off a Saturday in Boston, leaving morning of and still getting back, you really can't beat.
It opens up some.
Well, no, you really can't beat a Saturday afternoon at 12:30 against the Devils. That's a train ride away.
That's cake. That's easy peasy.
So that's the next one I have on my radar, followed by Rangers the following week, followed by Devils again on a Wednesday, which is a little different. But
I feel like if you were able to take a half day at work, you could do one of those on the weeknight if you really wanted to.
Well, one of them is that's what I'm saying. One of them.
Look at that.
Well, two of them, and I'm just gonna that's gonna be work the schedule out so I can go up and not just go up for the game, but be up there for morning and all that.
Well, we'll get some more travel stories out of Kevin this year. We do have a couple of games to talk about real quick. There is a game tomorrow in Columbus that I almost went to. Wasn't able to make it work just for logistical reasons, but I'm about 3 hours from Columbus, so I'll end up going to a game out there at some point. Looked it up the other day, by the way,
because you don't want to go to a game in Pittsburgh.
Oh no, I'll go to a game in Pittsburgh too. But the reason I wanted to go to Columbus, would you like to guess how much tickets are on StubHub after fees?
I was about to say the tickets in Pittsburgh are a little bit more pricey than they are in Columbus.
It would be cheaper for me to go to Pittsburgh, or I'm sorry, go to Columbus,
stay overnight,
maybe get a hotel room and come back, than sit in equivalent seats in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
so
you can get in nationwide.
Those tickets are $20 a piece, aren't they?
You can get into Nationwide Arena, including StubHub fees, for $11.
Wow.
Cheapest ticket to the December 23rd game in Pittsburgh is like $86. So,
well, for one,
anyway,
Battle of Pennsylvania for one, two, right before the holiday. It's
I know. I'm targeting that February game because the Penguins have a lot more time to get bad. Hopefully they've traded everyone away by then.
What's really funny is that was almost a target for me to go cover.
Listen, if you come, I'll buy you a Primanti sandwich.
Well, I'm not going to, because one, it's a little bit too close to all the personal stuff that's going on right now, so it's a little bit tricky to navigate. That's one. Two, it kind of feels, I don't like looking at road games, and I'm actually, although I am doing this with the Ranger one and the Devil one is one of the Devils ones on the weeknight is isolated enough that it kind of makes sense. It's sandwiched between two home games, but they play the Rangers on Thursday and then play the Islanders on Friday, and theoretically I could just bounce to Long Island and do that too. But I'm not.
Of course.
I'm not going to try to force that in there and then end up, well, because then think about it from an expenses standpoint. Now it involves 2 nights for hotels, because I'm not going to be able to come back on Friday either after the game. It's more travel out to where Long Island is. So that's going to be Long Island Regional Rail. It's right. It's a little bit more expensive and a little bit more time consuming that I just don't want to do. But I don't like looking at some of these trips and then being like, just pick one. If they're out for the trip, go where they go and come back and do it. And
does that mean you're doubling up and doing Dallas, Chicago in March?
Oh God, no, I'm not doing any of them in March because it's way too close. Right. But Pittsburgh goes to, like, it goes from Pittsburgh to Winnipeg, and I did try to price it out, and yeah, once you add the Winnipeg portion to it, it's like,
it gets
well, Pittsburgh to begin with was pricey, honestly. Like I even said, it's a shame it's not a one-off, because the easiest thing to truly do is drive.
Listen, I'm just saying I have an air mattress.
I hear you, but I'm saying it's the easiest thing to do is drive, but that's also, like, especially in my line of this, it's not the easiest thing to do, because sometimes you don't have 6 hours to commit to figuring it out. Like you just like that's a day where I'd love to just wake up, catch a flight again early at like 8:30 in the morning, be in Pittsburgh.
It's about a 45-minute flight. I connected through Pittsburgh, or I connected through Philly last time I flew home.
Well, there you go.
It's easy.
And like what I'm saying about that is that like then that way you make the morning skate, you do the whole deal, and you know it's the combo of night games requiring you to stay because you're never getting a flight out of there after a certain point. What's that? I know, I got you, but well, but I'm saying I'm saying I'm saying in general because then
I know.
Then it means I'm planning for 2 days worth of scheduling and then trying to figure out what time is good to get back in the airport and all that stuff like that. Like it's just a lot. Like,
all right, let's talk about these upcoming games here. We got Columbus.
Yeah, I'm not home again until Thursday. So
right. Theoretically, other than Minnesota, who is maybe a touch surprisingly just a very, very good team right now, Columbus and Detroit, if this is a week that you're a playoff team, and I it's kind of been our theme for the last 2 years with this Flyers team, is you look at this week and go, okay, well, if they're a playoff team, this is probably what they're going to do. If they're not a playoff team, this is probably what they're going to do. And either way, you probably expect 2 points in Columbus. Detroit is a bit more of a toss-up, and then obviously Minnesota's a tough team.
I don't know. I wouldn't go that far with it. Like Detroit's worse than I think it's worse than Columbus is right now. They have fewer points.
I mean, Detroit's really been struggling.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care about any of that as we're talking about it. I don't care about the point totals. I don't care about how many wins those teams have. I don't care about any of it. If you make the same mistakes you've been making for the last however many games, you'll lose those games too.
If you play like the team you were playing like during the 5-game point streak, you're probably going to be okay. If you're playing like the team that played this week,
not completely though. If you play like the team that was that was taking over comeback mode against Florida, and if you play like the team that played, especially the first 2 periods in Boston, you'll win games.
Well, they look like a good team. I texted you and said, if this team turns out to be good, there's a lot of fun things going on with this team. Like they have some talent, and they're starting to put some skill together.
I just think that part of the not part of the equation here with it, but it's like, this is what I mean by they got to figure out what they're going to be kind of in a way, because, and I'll now I'll legitimately give Charlie his second shout out of the show legitimately because his post game from the Utah game was a month ago. This is a loss that doesn't feel like anything. Now it feels like a missed opportunity. And that's very true, because now we're sitting here. What did we talk about last week about the month of December and the record that they would need to kind of match to be where they were last year and things like that? And we were looking for 7 wins, right? And of the you're looking for 7, and I think you could accept a 1-1-1 weekend if, you could accept that if, by the way, the Rangers just lost again.
Love it.
But I think you can accept 1-1-1, knowing how you played and kind of feeling like you got a little jobbed in Boston. I get it. Like,
I think even a little bit in the Florida game too.
Well, to a degree, but like
a little bit, but I think less so.
Well, because it was more self-inflicted at the start too. Like that's the other part of it. Right? Like you can't fall into a 3-0 hole of that team and think you're going to win games.
That's what I'm
great.
saying.
Great that you were leading the game, but I think that like because this is what, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about the standings position. If they fall behind these other 2 teams, and now it looks like, oh goodness, they're now they're back in last place in the Metro a week after we were talking about them in a wild card spot. Now you've got a problem.
I agree.
If you win that game and you win against Detroit and we're back, if we're doing a show next week and they have a 2-3-1 record in December because they lost to Minnesota and Florida, which were kind of expected. And okay, the loss to Utah is not great. The loss in overtime to Boston, probably one of the toss-ups that was on there. There were overtime losses in that record. So you can add that.
Columbus and Detroit, you're right back on it.
Right. Now, I don't love the fact that at that given point in time, you're at the number of regulation losses that we said you would need to match the record. But I also understand that you're in a position where maybe you can at least come out of this thing, to play 6. You'd still have 7 games left. If you have 2 wins, you can still win 5 of 7 and still 5 of the 7 left and still be at the same number of wins and just maybe not overtime losses. And we're talking, or maybe you win an extra one somewhere in there. Who knows? I mean,
maybe they come out and beat Minnesota. You never know.
The disappointing part is that they were in a position, and I really think the one that I don't think we're going to get over is the Boston one more. You were in a position to win that game. You probably maybe everything goes differently if you win the game in Boston to begin with. But if you were sitting at 2 wins against Boston and Utah and had the slate of games you had in front of you, we could be sitting here talking about, again, win 2 more games this week. You're at 4. Right before the break, you would have Detroit again, you would have Columbus again, you would have Pittsburgh, and you could be looking at a situation where you're talking win 2 games out of the last 4, which would include Anaheim and San Jose.
If the Flyers had an extra 3 points right now, if they had beaten Boston and beaten Utah, they would currently have 31 points and they would be in the first wild card spot. Now there's some games in hand going on, and I'm not going to get into all of that, but they would currently be sitting in the first wild card. Right. I'm not right. But they'd be sitting in the first wild card spot, and we would be talking a lot more seriously about a path to the playoffs. And as it sits here now, it's obviously a bit of a toss up, and it's one of those, they control their destiny things, and the fact that they just have to win a lot of hockey games from here.
Right. So, but that's that they can still do that, right? Like, sure. This is the case. This is the way it's going to be for a while. The way that the standings are so jumbled up, win 3 in a row, you're in there. Lose 3 in a row, you're not. And it's going to go like that for most of the rest of the year, probably. I mean, what I would want to see more than anything about that too is I would want to see not how I want to say how they respond. It's not that, like, because of course that's important. It's how long they last in this thing, I think, is what I'm thinking of. Like, all right, it's clear. Most of December, you're still going to be in the race because, like, again, one good week puts you back into the playoffs. A bad week probably knocks you near the bottom. Like, that's how close it is. And by saying that, that probably means that you can hang in this race potentially into January through the course of January, maybe even close to the trade deadline again.
Well, and one thing that may help you out here, and we kind of touched on it briefly, didn't really have time to super break it down. You did get your starting goalie back. Hopefully, Sam Ersson comes back and provides a little bit of stability in net. You did also get Jamie Drysdale back, so your defense core is kind of rolling back towards being healthier. And like I said, we don't really have time to get into that tonight. We will get into that on next week's show. I think we're back to normal Sunday record next week.
For next week, probably, yes.
Okay, so schedule is going to be a little bit closer to back to normal next week. And obviously, as we get closer to the holidays, we'll let you guys know what our schedule looks like around that. But yeah, so I think that is a good place to put a pin in it for today. Like I said, we got a couple games to talk about here. We'll have a little bit of an extended look at Ersson and Drysdale back from injury to talk about next week, and we will be back next week. You can find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. We're also on YouTube. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like button over there. That really helps us out. Share it with your friends. Let them know what we got going on over here. Follow us on social media. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso everywhere except Blue Sky, where he's just at Kevin Durso. And other than that, we'll be back next week to talk about this dang team. Talk about Matt Bain's talk about hopefully Owen Tippett keeps it hot. 3 goals this week. But until then, we'll be back next week. We'll see you.